Hey, what's up YouTube? Welcome back to my in-depth Spider-Man series reviews, and today I'm reviewing the second Spider-Man film, Spider-Man 2. Spider-Man 2 is directed by Sam Raimi and stars Tobey Maguire, Kirsten Dunst, Alfred Molina, and a bunch of other actors. So this film was released in June 2004 and made about $783,766,000 worldwide, making it the third highest grossing worldwide movie of 2004. It of course didn't make as much as the first film, but it was still a really good gross. So in Spider-Man 2, Spider-Man is already an established character from the first film, and during an experiment performed by a man named Otto Octavius, the experiment causes an explosion that kills his wife, and Octavius, now nicknamed Dr. Octopus, blames Spider-Man for the accident and seeks out for revenge. So after Peter gets fired from his pizza delivery job... Oh, and also after we see J. Jonah Jameson return, who is once again amazing in this film, and even funnier than he is in the first film in my opinion. So after that, we see a more emotional start for a Spider-Man movie. Harry is still sad about his father's death, Aunt May is still really sad about Uncle Ben's death, and along with facing eviction, she's also pretty lonely with Peter having his own place to live at. And also, Mary Jane is kind of mad at Peter for not attending her play on time, so she sort of falls in love with another guy. And I gotta say, Mary Jane is kind of an ass in this film. In the first film, I found her to be a, pretty likable character, and, in this film, like, she's not that bad, but, like, sometimes she can be, like, a really big jerk to Peter. But despite that, I love how this film opens with a more emotional start. It really shows you that being a superhero and having a bunch of superpowers doesn't mean that you're not vulnerable to problems. The beginning of this film really sets up, much of the tone for the rest of the movie, and I just really enjoy that. In the mix of all this, Harry is sponsoring a fusion power project of nuclear scientist Otto Octavius. And of course, during the public demonstration, the fusion reactor destabilizes, and it causes a bunch of destruction, and it ends up killing Otto's wife. But of course, Spider-Man arrives and shuts down the experiment. So at the hospital, the doctors, try to remove Otto's harness with, like, these robot tentacle arms that he had during the experiment. But Otto uses them to attack the doctors, and the brand new Dr. Octopus is ready for action. Oh my god, I think Dr. Octopus, is just an amazing villain. He's definitely the best Spider-Man villain, and one of the best Marvel villains of all time. Just the fact that this guy has robotic arms that just do what he wants to do is just so awesome. I think the entire setup to his character is just handled in an amazing way. Let's just not forget about this great moment. So Doc Ock robs a bank that Peter and May are visiting, and he takes May hostage.
Hand her over!
Of course.
Easy now!
Butterfingers.
Who then gets rescued by Peter as Spider-Man. And then, this is where Peter loses everything in this movie. Harry is pissed at Peter for being Spider-Man's friend, Mary Jane becomes engaged to astronaut John Jameson. So all of this causes just Peter to have a complete emotional breakdown, and he loses his powers. I just love the fact that Peter is buried so far into the ground in this movie. I mean, we all care for him, and it's just so sad, how much he loses at this point in the movie. The fact that Harry is pissed at him, Mary Jane is engaged with someone else, and his powers are lost just makes his character so vulnerable, and it really makes us want him to rise over all of this. So Peter decides to completely abandon his Spider-Man identity, and he kind of returns to his original Peter Parker life. Peter decides to tell Aunt May the truth behind Uncle Ben's death and how he was sort of responsible for it. But thankfully, Aunt May forgives him. So, life seems to be going, like, sort of fine, without the Spider-Man ego, but the rise in crime really worries Peter, and again, you get that vulnerability, even without being Spider-Man. But yeah, I just love seeing Peter, try out his old life again, and seeing his reactions to crime as not being Spider-Man, and just as a normal human being. It's just something really cool and unique, and something that we hadn't seen before. People dying really tempts Peter to become Spider-Man again. Doc Ock makes a deal with Harry for receiving trinium to fuel his reactor, and Harry agrees to this deal in exchange for Spider-Man's life. He tells Octavius to seek Peter, who is supposedly good friends with Spider-Man. So Doc Ock finds Peter and tells him to find Spider-Man, and he captures Mary Jane. Peter's powers are fully back, and he goes after Octavius. Then what we get next is probably the best scene in the entire Spider-Man series. Spider-Man and Doc Ock fight on a train. Doc Ock hijacks the controls, leaving Superman to save the passengers, and wow, is it awesome! The tension of Spider-Man saving all these passengers from dying on this train is just so amazing, and you're just on the edge of your seat for the entire time in this scene. And Peter does manage to save the passengers at the very last second. So Spider-Man is unmasked, but the passengers are such good people that they reveal to him that they won't tell the public who he is. Seeing such a rise in the character of Spider-Man in this movie is really what makes it amazing. We see him go to his lowest point in this movie, and then we see him rise from the ground to save these people, and he rises to the absolute top. It's just so great seeing him at such a low point, and then going to such a high point. It just completely pays off. But Doc Ock takes Superman and delivers him to Harry, and Harry finds out that Peter is Spider-Man, and his reaction to the reveal is just great. Peter does convince Harry to tell him where Doc Ock is, so Spider-Man arrives at Ock's lair attempting to rescue Mary Jane. Doc Ock and Spider-Man fight once again, and Spider-Man reveals that he is Peter Parker. Octavius finally commands the tentacles to obey him, and he basically sacrifices himself to destroy his nuclear reactor experiment, which basically redeems him as he dies. Mary Jane also finds out that Peter is Spider-Man and why they cannot be together. But weirdly, she says this.
I think I always knew. All this time.
Then explain this, Mary. So Harry is visited by a vision of his father in a mirror asking for Harry to avenge him. Harry finds a secret room containing the Green Goblin's equipment from his dad. And as Mary Jane is about to get married to John, she completely abandons him and basically says that she can accept being with Peter. And wow, what a great ending to a great film. So overall, Spider-Man 2 is so amazing, and it's my favorite Marvel film. Sometimes I do have trouble deciding which I like better, Winter Soldier or this movie, but in the long run, and as of for a long time from this point, this is just definitely my favorite Marvel film of all time. This film just takes the first Spider-Man film and just takes it up to a whole nother level. It just takes the emotions, the action, the story, the drama, it takes all of that and just completely takes it to a whole nother level, and I just really enjoy seeing that. In this film, Peter Parker, aka Spider-Man, is such a vulnerable character, and he goes through so much in this film, and all of the things that he goes through in this film just makes us care for his character so much. And usually my favorite protagonists are the ones that are vulnerable, and we get to see that so much from Spider-Man in this film. When vulnerable characters are just beat to the ground and they just need something to rise from, it just makes us care for them more. It makes us care for them more as characters. We understand the struggle that they're dealing with, and it just shows so much in this movie. When you have nothing to rise from and you're just pretty much on top of things all the time, it's just not as interesting. I mean, you might like the character and everything, or maybe you don't, but no matter what, if you really have nothing to rise from and you're just on top of things always, it makes the character just less interesting, and it makes us care less for them. And when Spider-Man rises in the end, boy is it epic! Harry's character is also really well developed, and his seek for vengeance provides some conflict with Peter, aka Spider-Man. And yeah, sure, Mary Jane can be a big jerk in this film, but at the end, she slightly redeems herself, when she can kind of accept being with Peter. And oh my god, as I said, Dr. Octavius is amazing. We really understand him as a villain, and we understand that he has a goal, much like we do. And he's just such a badass, having these robotic tentacle arms. It's just so cool. And, And the thing is, he's human. He's a human at the end of the day. And, we really want him to live, but we just don't want him to be this monster. And I gotta say, his death at the end is actually pretty sad. And yes, he really did redeem himself when he made that sacrifice. The plot of this movie is really good. Doc Ock's plan is just really clever, and his whole entire plan is just a really neat idea. And seeing Peter struggle as Spider-Man with the plot in this movie, you just really feel for the guy. Also, the action in this movie is incredible. All the action scenes are very well filmed, and the train sequence is just so mind-blowingly awesome. The tone of this movie is also what makes this movie really great. Taking Spider-Man in a more darker, more emotional direction was definitely the right way to go. It being the second movie in the series, and it just really works for the movie, and it just really helps develop the character of Peter Parker, aka Spider-Man. The soundtrack of this movie, much like the first movie, is really good. We get that Spider-Man 2002 theme back in this movie, which is just so great. And the rest of the soundtrack, once again gets you pumped for some Spider-Man action. So as I said, this is definitely the best Marvel film, and I don't think any future Spider-Man films will ever come close to this. So I hope you enjoyed my in-depth review of Spider-Man 2, and in my next in-depth review, I'll be reviewing Spider-Man 3.
Pizza time.